American Islamic College, a place where knowledge becomes transformation. Your support moves the mission forward in the work and in the world. This is more than education, it's a calling, because every contribution leads to a life of purpose and impact.
You know, these are moments of really thinking about how do we connect to the Quran, but also how does the Quran speak to us during these times of turbulations? Anyway, sorry, I just wanted to share that that's where that moment of grief was coming from.
Wow.
And then she's also then Dr. Mahan, she's also commanded to then fast. And the fast is so amazing to me that she's basically being told, don't talk, baby Jesus is going to talk on behalf of you. And whatever's going to happen, like the stress, the anxiety, the possible clinical depression that she's going through in a postpartum phase as a woman is being wrecked. First of all, I think it's beautiful that the Quran is reminding all of us, especially the men in our community, that the incredible birthing of Isa alayhi salam comes with the difficulties that every single woman faces, right? And every woman has a different experience, a birthing experience. And thank you for allowing me to share this part with you, because I think it's so important that so many of us recite the Quran, recite Surah Maryam, but we forget that the entire birthing of Isa alayhi salam, yes, it's beautiful and miraculous, but it also comes with the very real human experience, right? And the pain, the Quran is recognizing that it's a painful experience. There's emotions in it. There's the reality that a woman during that time is so vulnerable. And Maryam alayhi salam is the greatest example for us, of course. But even her in that state, she's breaking down, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divine, is consoling her. And so I ask the question to our own society as Muslimin is, what is our responsibility to women during that time of birthing? Because every single birth is a divinely inspired, and it's really, I mean, it's something that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is granting as a blessing, right, to each and every human pair. So yeah, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on the idea that the Quran recognizes, I think, what even in postmodernity we could refer to as postpartum depression, or the idea of women going through something that's really, really difficult for them, and how do then we support that process? And I know some people may say, well, that's too far-fetched, but I don't think so. I think the mere fact that the Quran recognizes that this is a very painful but also miraculous experience, that there's khair in it, and then she's asked to just remain, like, retreat to herself in some way, right? And that in itself, I think, is such a beautiful example of women needing that sense of retreating into a place where they can heal. I think asking her to remain silent is saying, you can take your time, you can retreat. We're gonna have baby Jesus talk on behalf of you, so don't worry. And honestly, wallahu alam, and I know this is a parallel of tadabbur, maybe I'm taking it too far, but those women who are going through whatever processes that they're going through, like, who's talking on their behalf? Who's taking the stand, so to speak, to say, okay, I got you, right? Baby Jesus gets, he's behind his mother, and there's a beauty in that, and of course it's contextual there. But I often ask the question of, how does this parallel into the birthing experiences that our women are having, and what does it mean to be a supportive system for women during this time?
Wow, that's really powerful. And the only thing I would add that even adds to the heroism of Maryam here is the fact that they're questioning her moral integrity because she's having a child out of wedlock. So she's also under moral suspicion in a very conservative society, right? In a super judgmental conservative society where she knows that she will be viewed in a tainted way because she's giving birth to a child outside of wedlock. And growing up, growing up in a Catholic family, of course, there was a ton of reverence for Mary. And I remember lots of talk about, the miraculousness of Mary's virginity. But the one thing that we never really talked about was Mary's courage in a conservative Middle Eastern society that was going to judge her morally for saying yes to God, that she still said yes to God, knowing that in that society that could have meant death for her in so many ways. And so the courage of Mary is something that really comes out in this Quranic narration of the Mary story. And and I think that for me it's a beautiful complement to the narration that we read in the New Testament. It's just, and I think that it really gives you a sense of that sort of conservative society, the judgmentalism of that conservative society, saying that your father was not a bad man and your mom wasn't an unchaste woman, so like, what are you doing? And it's even in that context, her courage to say yes to God, knowing that all that is coming, to me is just really deeply impressive and powerful.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks to both of you. I just want to say, I'm just soaking it in, and it's just so important to hear your voice, Ustaza Tahira, because I think this, for everyone who's tuning in, this is why we need, we need to I think we need to have a woman's perspective and just diverse perspectives, because so much more is in the Quran that we miss just because everyone has partial perspectives. And when we tune out like half of humanity, and I do believe in that there is a non-binary, the gender is a spectrum. So there's so many different perspectives that we miss. And so I want to thank you for coming on and just, sharing this, and I'm just kind of absorbing it, and the need to, provide that kind of support, the structural elements of society that need to look after the vulnerable, reading through a surah like Maryam that was provided to her from Jesus, but who's doing it today? Who's the Jesus for the women who are giving birth today in vulnerable situations, in war zones, or even in in normal stable times, because it's such a what's the word I'm looking for? I witnessed childbirth, so I was only able to see it, but it was one of the most intense things to witness, and so I can't imagine what it is to experience, right? And so thank you for sharing that and for just developing that aspect of this reading. I'm going to turn to the end. If I'm just going to move us along to the end in the interest of time, the end of the surah, there's some fantastic verses, but I'll point out a couple. One, to connect to the point you made, Ustaza, about the abd, the servant aspect of the prophet and of Zechariah, and right at the end, when it's talking about the unity of God, it again comes back to this verse 93. There is no one in the heavens or the earth who will not come to the Lord of mercy as a servant. So this is how it's. So this is a major theme that I think you've locked onto, and I just noticed here at the end as well. And everyone, a couple of verses down, this is something new that we haven't read before. They will each return to Him, which is to God, on the day of resurrection, all alone, farda, like as individuals.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how in this world we have these relations, the wombs that bore you. These are such important themes of the Quran, But ultimately, when it's your return, you're going to be alone, and you're going to be accountable only for yourself, and nobody will bear the burdens of another. And then the next verse, 96, I find it so interesting because we have the Lord of Mercy, right? And I know in Christian-Muslim dialogue, often it's like, well, one is the religion of love. We don't really have a lot of love used as much. It's there, and it's definitely part of the tradition, but we use more mercy, and you could see that kind of rahmah theme in the Quran that we've been reading so far, and also in this surah. But I find it really interesting how in this chapter on Mary and with references of Jesus, look at what this verse does, 96. But the Lord of mercy will give love. Almost to anticipate, these debates and the Lord of mercy will give love to those who believe and do righteous deeds. So love is not altogether absent, but it's incorporated, right? Inna alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati sayaj'alu lahum ar-rahmanu wudda. That's the wud. You might have heard the name Wadud. Al-Wadud is one of the names of God. And so I just thought those were some nice themes that came at the end of the surah, wrapping this up as we turn to the next one. Taha, we're already at 10:50. But the next surah, well, I'm just going to say a word about it. Just so
say one word. Yes.
It begins Taha. This is another 2 letters this time, which are supposed to be symbolizing the Prophet. Taha, you can listen to Anashid and all or Na'ats, about the Prophet using Taha. Ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana litashqa illa tazkiratan liman yakhsha. So you have the same, rhyme scheme. And this surah, it's almost a counterpart to the surah Joseph. In Joseph, you had the Israelites come and settle in Egypt. And in this surah, you're going to read the story of Exodus back to the promised land. So, and after this, when we come to the parts that we were supposed to read today, Al-Anbiya, it's the litany of the prophets, ending with Mary, and then addressing the prophet himself. It's a beautiful sequence. Maybe we start with that tomorrow and try to catch up in the next couple of days. But probably closing thoughts from both of you.
Yeah, so I think the only thing I'd say about Taha is subhanallah, it is actually chronologically right after Surah Maryam. So it's we see a little bit of that going back and forth of certain surahs that are being the revelation order versus how how it's actually placed in the Quran versus the actual chronology. And in this case, it's actually, most ulama agree that it is directly after Surah Maryam. So we know it's early, like maybe at the end of the Meccan period, year 4 or 5 or so. And what's important, I think, for us to take away is that this is the actual surah, at least the beginning of it, is what Umar radiallahu anh had read or recited, and is just in that moment is, of the recitation of the surah, or the listening of the verses of the surah, that he accepts Islam. So I think that's really profound. And for me, every time I read this, it's so, I don't know what the right word is, I'm always just, I freeze, every time I read this, because like you said, Dr. Mahan, Taha is actually, many ulama agree that it's referring to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is why people have this name, they'll name their children this name, which refers to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى. We have not revealed the Quran upon you, right? Not just like the Quran is just revealed, but upon you, upon your heart. لتشقى. And shaqiya yashqa is this place of the heart where you're just in so much anxiety and so much grief. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, Taha, we have not revealed this Quran upon you so that you may be in that state. إِلَّا تَذْكِرَةً لِمَنْ يَخْشَى. What is how is it translated in your end when this verse?
But as a reminder for those who hold God in awe.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, yakhsha, to be in awe.
Mm.
Mm.
And then look, it says تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى. Like it goes from أنزلنا عليك to تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى. Like that this is a continuous tanzil is like happening, slowly over time. ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى. So
Yeah,
it's not just to the Prophet, right?
Yeah.
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I think one thing also in closing I wanted to mention is Surah Maryam. Of course, the beginning of it is Zakaria alayhi salam, Maryam alayhi salam, but then the rest of the stories are of the prophets again, right? Just going back to Ibrahim alayhi salam and many of the other prophets, and then bringing it back to a close. There is a very powerful verse though at the end of Surah Maryam, which some people may argue, well, this is a very interfaithy surah. There's aspects of it that our Christian brothers and sisters agree to, and some don't, right? So, for example, I've researched biblical scholars on whether or not baby Jesus spoke from the cradle, and I haven't found any biblical scholar confirming that. So, this idea of Isa alayhi salam speaking from the cradle is exclusive, to my understanding, for Muslimin. And Dr. Giannotti, please let me know if that's not what you've understood or researched yourself. And I'm curious about that, because I wonder if that was just something that was never recorded, because Isa alayhi salam is not necessarily his birth is very relevant, right? And frankincense, actually, I found out recently, actually came from Gaza. So the idea of the three men who, the three kings, or the what are they referred to as the wise men? There we go. The wise men who come, that the incense is actually brought from Al-Ghazza al-Hashim, which I'm sure you guys know. Like the Prophet's great grandfather is actually buried in Gaza, so a lot of people refer to Gaza as Ghazza al-Hashim, right? So anyway, these are all like little side notes. But I found it really interesting that that's not something that's shared within the traditions. And then, of course, the ending of Surah Maryam is pretty strong, like where it says, تكاد السماوات يتفطرن منه وتنشق الأرض وتخر الجبال هدا. Mahan, Dr. Mahan, you want to translate that? It's verse number 90.
Yeah. I think I deliberately skipped over it, but I will translate it.
It's almost apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Right. In Yusuf Ali, it's indeed we have put forth, when it's saying that God has begotten a son, it says, indeed you have put forth a thing that is monstrous, as if the skies were ready to burst and the earth split asunder and the mountains fall down in utter ruin, that they should invoke a son for God, most gracious, most glorious. For it is not consonant with the majesty of God, most gracious, that he should beget a son, meaning that God is exalted above those human functions of having a child.
So what I want to point out is, when I do interfaith work, a lot of my Muslim friends will say, don't say this part, because and I think we have to be very honest about the beauty of where these ideas align for us and where they differ. And the greatest example that I think we could look upon is that this surah had already been revealed when Muslimin go to Abyssinia, and the king of Habasha, he's aware that there are these differences, but he accepts the Muslimin in that, and he protects them, and he's accepting of the idea that there is this very big difference, but at the same time he still draws that line into the sand and says, but that difference is just like this line for me. So it's the value that the Quran is teaching that supersedes that, and he's still in communication, and eventually our understanding is that he does accept Islam, and this idea of the higher power, right? Because it's something that he was practicing anyway, is to surrender to a higher power. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that I think Mahan, Dr. Mahan, I really appreciate that you said the verse about إن كل من في السماوات والأرض إلا آتي الرحمن عبادا. Where am I? Sorry, I wanted to say that.
آتي الرحمن عبدا.
Where am I? إن كل من في السماوات والأرض إلا آتي الرحمن عبدا. And then actually fast forward to إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات سيجعل لهم الرحمن ودا. That the verses still end, right, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being recognized as the most loving, right, and Ar-Rahman. So the closing is still like almost like a reconciliation of like going from, hey, this qawl is so like it's at the level of like the sky splitting and the earth splitting, but at the same time it's so amazing how like then it just kind of goes back to this idea of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahman, right? And that all of us, everyone, and this applies to all of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he is Al-Wadud.
Okay, so Rahman meaning most gracious or most compassionate, and Wadud is the Lord of loving kindness.
Right.
Yeah, these are beautiful Arabic names. Wow. I mean, there's so much more to say, and I know that we it's not, again, as I said when we started, it's not the quantity, it's the quality. So these are beautiful points, Ustada, and so I think Dr. Mahan will let you have the last word, and you can close us out tonight.
Me? Well, I would turn it over to Ustaza. Again, thank you for being here and for sharing your perspectives. That's so important and enriching for our audience and for our community. And we hope to hear more, voices, your voice and voices that represent. It's always been a male-dominated tradition. That is also true, and I'm coming to be convinced that is definitely represents a partial perspective, and we can only be better by hearing a fuller perspective that represents a fuller humanity. So maybe close us out with a recitation of your choice. Surah Al-Asr is our formula, but it doesn't have to be. So you can recite Surah Al-Asr or anything you like to take us out.
Yeah, I mean, I also just wanted to say that, Jazakallah khair for the opportunity for having a female reflect and do tadabbur with you, particularly on these verses, because growing up in our masajid, mashallah, it's been an amazing experience, and our community is so beautiful and so diverse and so incredible, and our scholars are so kind, many of them, to our communities. And one thing I found, however, that's been missing is we put Maryam alayhi salam on this pedestal, which she absolutely deserves, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, like, she is going to be the one in Jannah who is at this very high pedestal. And then the Quran, as it's talking about her experiences, allows us to recognize that the vulnerability of what she goes through. And when we read those verses, the Quran is meant to be something that's practiced. So I've never heard, for example, a khatib talk about Maryam alayhi salam and say, there are Marys every single day amongst us, your wives, your daughters, your sisters, and the experiences that they go through, and like the pre, the during, and the post of the birthing process, which is a divine miracle, right? And I keep using the word miracle, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says ayah. It doesn't use the word mu'jiza. It actually says ayah. These are ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
These are meant to be signs. And what are signs? They're isharat. We're supposed to take direction from them. We're not supposed to just say, oh, look at this amazing miracle, everybody. Yes, let's clap our hands to it. We're supposed to look at them and say, what direction is this pointing us to? How do we actually map our lives out in a way with the isharat, right? So what is the ishara? And she even says, فَأَشَارَتْ إِلَيْهِ, right? There's all these signs in the surah of what does this mean for us, right? And so who does she get to, like the women in our lives, subhanAllah, who are they being supported by? How are they being supported? You know, there's sisters right now who cannot go to the masjid because they have children and they're not able to experience Ramadan in the same way that many of our, male colleagues and partners are. So Ramadan for them is very different now, right? Because now they're in this process of, and we often say, well, that's just your ibadah, right? And it is a great ibadah, right? To be able to say, now she's focused on something that's different, but it doesn't mean that she's exclusive to that. What does it mean to support her in that process? So I just wanted to make sure I talked about that when we're talking about the surah, because often I feel like we gloss over this as, okay, great, this was a miracle, let's clap our hands, let's move on. But actually it's meant to allow us to redirect and look at this as, what guidance are we receiving from this? So just like how Dr. Timothy, you mentioned this yesterday, and I thought about it afterwards all day today, of in the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam, of like, what do we learn from the story of Musa alayhi salam of being humble enough to say, okay, I know a lot, but being, allowing to go from being Musa, Kalimullah, to saying, okay, Khidr alayhi salam, like I want to learn from you, right? I have, and then also like the judgments that we have of other people, and like allowing ourselves to think through these parables in ways that applies to our daily lives. So thank you, Jazakallah khair. I really appreciate the ability of even being able to speak about this, because I know many women are probably listening to this and saying, yes, and yes, and yes, right? Because these are experiences that they're having every single day. And in a way, it's like they're silenced. And I don't think that silence is something that's meant to be there. I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires for all of us to be that voice for each other when it's needed. Just like Isa alayhi salam was for his mother.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tahir. We're your students. So it's been such an honor for us to learn from you.
So should I just close out with Surah Asr, or?
Sure. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العظيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد.
Sadaqallah al-Azim. Indeed, God has spoken the truth. That's what, after reciting, when we say Sadaqallah al-Azim. So I think we let it sit with the recitation and wish everyone a good night.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Ustadha Tahira.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum.
Earn your fully accredited MA in Islamic Studies in as little as 1 year and start as early as this spring. If you've done Alamiya, studied at a Darul Uloom, or gone deep in traditional seminary life, but nobody's giving you credit for it in the academic world, this is your bridge from classical Islamic learning to recognized credentials. Fully online, affordable, built for students just like you. Apply now and prepare to lead a life of purpose and impact.